Hi guys, TotallydubbedHD here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Edifier TWS NB. These are true wireless earphones with noise cancellation technology and can be found for around £100 in the UK. If you live elsewhere or indeed are in the UK, the locally link in the description below will take you to your localized Amazon store. So what do you get in the box? Well, you get the earphones themselves with their carrying case, silicone tips with also extra ear fins, and you've got a USB Type-C to USB Type-A cable. All of that is all great. Now moving on to the earphones. Now the earphones case itself is pretty bulky, it's pretty large, and also not exactly the case I like. Also in terms of its design, it isn't the best because the way it opens up, this lip over here means that it's not as easy access. It might seem very trivial to some people, but let's say if I compare it to these JBL earphones, that's quite easy access there, whereas this little lip over here makes it a little bit hard to do. Also, as I was mentioning in terms of size, if I compare it to some of its competitors, you can see over here that the case is one of the larger cases out there. In comparison to the Creative, which is equally as large, this is a lot lighter weight in comparison to these Edifier ones. And in comparison to the Libratone ones, well, you can see the difference is pretty huge. Now the case itself does provide pretty good amount of charge. It can be charged via USB Type-C at the back, and there's a 4 LED indicator to give you an indication of the remaining charge of the case. In terms of the case itself, it really depends in terms of what functionality you use. If you have ANC enabled, then the case will provide 10 hours of additional charge, whilst the earphones themselves will last around 5 hours on a single charge, so therefore 15 hours in total. If you were to have ANC off, however, the case will provide 22 hours of charge, while the earbuds will have 11 hours on a single charge, means 33 hours on a single charge with the case included. So it really depends on terms of the mode. I presume most people will be using with ANC on, so expect around 15 hours of total playback time. In terms of the case itself, it doesn't accept wireless charging as far as I'm aware, but it is pretty fast charging. It takes around 1 hour, 1.5 hours to charge till full if it's empty. Now let's go on to the design of the earphones. So first of all, in terms of getting them out, as I mentioned, is a little bit tricky, but it's also worth bearing in mind the case itself has kind of like a little trigger over here which keeps them in. Now that might be a small little feature, but it's quite nice because it means that the earphones are definitely going to switch off when they're put in the case. In terms of the drivers, the earphone driver, the master driver and the slave driver. The master driver is the left earphone, whilst the right earphone is the slave driver. In other words, you can use the earphones if they're both placed in your ear, or if the left one's placed in your ear and the right one is put in the case, whereas you can't do the opposite. It just won't work. So just bear that in mind. Now in terms of the design of the earphones, yes, these are absolutely humongous. Let's just compare them to some of its competitors. Let's say the JBL earphones, which are a lot more ergonomic, but not exactly the smallest earphones, and then let's say the Libratone Track Air Plus, which make everything look ridiculously large. So yes, these are humongous in terms of fitting in your ear. I've got pretty large ears. I'll be fast to admit that and put my hand up for that. In that case, I just felt that these were sticking out like a sore thumb. Put them in my fiance's ears, and they were just ridiculously large. It looked silly. So in this case, they're not exactly the most ergonomic. Definitely wouldn't use them for any sort of sport activity, and furthermore, they're going to attract a lot of wind noise. So let's say if you're doing runs in a little bit windy area, or if you're doing biking with true wireless earphones in, then you're going to find these to be severely bad for wind noise. Now in terms of functionalities, they've got buttons, but the buttons over here can't be customized via the app, which I find it to be a little bit strange. I'll get into the app in just a bit, but in terms of buttons, what they allow you to do: a single press on either side play pauses, a double press will basically enable or disable ambient aware or ambient sound and noise cancellation, whilst a long press on either the right or left will go previous or next. So it's worth bearing those in mind in terms of functions that you can have and how they interact with your media or your phone calls or whatever have you. Other than that, there is LED lights. They can be fully disabled. They're pretty annoying to say the least when they're enabled, so I'd highly suggest you disabling these LED lights if you were to buy these earphones. Moving on there, you've got the actual fits. In terms of passive noise isolation, I've got great fit with these earbuds with the normal medium-sized tips. And yes, the earphone tip, the fin itself might seem silly given the size of these earphones and really not made for sports. They do provide a little bit of extra support, meaning that they're not going to fall off as easily. Again, if you're going to move your head in any sort of way vigorously, then you're going to find these are going to fall out pretty quickly. So moving on from there, I'm going to talk about the app. Now, the Edifier app is primitive to say the least. And also, I'm not quite fond of the fact that it's completely in Chinese when you go onto the Find section. Nothing against the Chinese section about it, but I'm downloading in English, so why am I having Chinese all over on the Find section? Anyway, that's a small point to make, but the actual app itself will give you battery indication of both earbuds, which is good to see, so it's independent. You can enable or disable the noise cancellation or ambient sound directly from here, and I'm just going to demonstrate the double tap function. You can see it switches to ambient sound, and then double tap it again, it will switch it off altogether. You can play music directly from the app, or if you play music, in my case using Power Amp, it didn't quite register that music was playing, but you could play and pause it directly from here, if that makes sense. It doesn't pick up the artist and things, that's what I'm trying to say. Now in terms of the settings, it's quite hard to press, but it's just over here at top right side, and you can see there's a few basic options. The biggest one is the headphone indicator. As I mentioned before, it is quite annoying to have the lights constantly flashing when they're connected, but again, you can disable that if you so wish. The headphone prompt tone to say if ANC or ambient aware is enabled or disabled, again, worth bearing that in mind, and time shutdown as well, which you can have if they're inactive for a little while. So all of that is great to see. I would have liked to see a built-in EQ and just the app to be a little bit more refined. For example, here it's not scaling it properly on my S10 Plus, and the S10 Plus isn't exactly a rare phone, so I would have liked to see a little bit more detail on the app. But let's get on to the earphones performance. First off, in terms of recording quality, in other words, if you're going to be taking calls with these earphones, truthfully, the call quality is actually really good. I'm pretty surprised at how it picked up voices, so the recipient will be able to hear you well. However, take that and put that in a busy environment when you've got, let's say, you're sitting in a cafe or whatever it might be, then you're going to find yourself that this is picking up a lot of background noise to the point where your recipient won't be able to hear you properly. So it really depends where you use them. If you're going to use them in a silent area, then absolutely call quality is actually surprisingly good and somewhat competes with £280 Sennheiser earphones. But in comparison to some of its other competitors, then I would say that in terms of the way it picks up environment sounds won't be the best. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of these other earphones aren't good at that either, but just worth bearing that in mind. Moving on from there, we've got sound quality. Now, sound quality, I don't know, somewhat on a fence. In some respect, they sound good, whilst in others, they sound a little bit lackluster. To try and explain why, I would say its majority is because of the soundstage presentation. It's too far back. It's almost a representation of where the actual driver probably sits and where the actual nozzle ends. I feel that the spacing and the airiness of the earphones is kind of overdone. They've somewhat tried to replicate an open soundstage, but kind of screwed it up by making it sound a bit too far away and a bit too distant sounding. So for example, in comparison to Sennheisers, or let's say the JBLs, or specifically the Anker earphones, they just sound a lot more, well, spaced out and a bit weird. But on the plus side, that does mean that they do sound less close sounding in comparison to somewhat like the Libratones or the JBL, sorry, where the creatives should be over here, let's put it that way. So overall, it just has a little bit of a weird sound. Now, going through the sound frequencies, I would say in terms of sub-bass frequency, it's there, but not that present, not as pronounced as, let's say, the JBL earphones, which are a little bit more expensive. In terms of its mid-bass, it's pretty well controlled and tight sounding. It's good, of course, doesn't compete with something like the Sennheiser earphones, but on the whole, it does sound a lot more controlled in comparison to the creatives. In terms of the mid-range, now here it just sounds a little bit odd. The lower mid seemed a little bit too dipped, and in comparison to, let's say, the Anker earphones, earphones with the JBLs, they just sounded a bit too dipped, whilst the upper mid sounded pretty boosted, and in there sounded decent. Not great, but decent. In terms of the highs, again, they sound okay, a bit rolled off at the top end, don't provide that nice sparkle, not as sibilant as, let's say, the JBL earphones, but on the whole, a pretty nice, well-rounded sound signature. So not bad in terms of sound quality. And what about ANC? Well, here's where I was absolutely blown away by these earphones. ANC performance is sensational. In comparison to the Sennheiser earphones, which are £280 ANC earphones, well, it puts these to complete shame. In comparison to other earphones that I've tested with other ANC capabilities, let's say the Libratone Track Air Plus or the Sony earphones, they're not quite on par in comparison to these earphones, more premium earphones, but for £100, these are fantastic. I mean, bear in mind the Libratones over here are £70 more, whilst the Sony earphones will be even more than that. For ANC performance, I was very surprised of how well they performed, and in this respect, I must give Edifier some credit. So on the whole, what do I make for them? Well, if you want raw sound quality, go for something like the Creatives, or let's say if you want to spend a little bit more, get the JBL or the Ankers instead. If you want noise cancellation, spend even more money and get the Libratones, or if you want better sound quality, spend a ridiculous more money and get the Sennheisers. But on the whole, these earphones are really good given their price tag, and I would recommend them for people who want ANC and decent sound if you can get over their quirks. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed, take care and bye bye.